All right, today I want to do a little pre-election analysis for the final vote coming up November 3rd. And what tips it towards President Trump and what might sort of be a potential shock points, if you will, for the pundit class. I'm going to look at a Rasmussen poll here. Now, there are people in the media and on the left that think that the Rasmussen poll tilts too much towards Republicans. Maybe too many others tilt too much towards Democrats. And the reason I say this is because Rasmussen was about the only one to get it right in 2016. They were much closer than the rest of them. So I think that adds some real legitimacy to who they're polling and how they're doing it. And what they found in their most recent 2020 election survey was that Joe Biden has a slight lead of 48% to 47% over President Trump. That's 1 percentage point, well within the margin of error. So that's a dead heat. Overall, among likely U.S. voters. Now, the reason that they do likely U.S. voters, those are people who have voted in the last 2 or 3 elections, depending how polls determine that. That is way better of a sample survey than registered voters, because 25 to 30% typically of registered voters don't show up in a presidential election. It'll probably be a smaller number this time they don't, but still a good 20% won't show up. So there's no point in polling those people, really. Likely voters are more likely to, but we're going to get into an even more likely group that is very promising for the president in just a minute. So that the Rasmussen poll has basically a dead heat overall. But a couple interesting points on it. Number one, among voters that are, quote, not affiliated with either major party, Trump has a 3-point lead. Now, these are these vaunted independent middle swing voters. They're not Republican, they're not Democrat, they're not Green, they're not Libertarian, they're not really affiliated with any party, and certainly neither of the major parties, right? So they can swing either way. And they are leaning towards Trump. So that's a pretty important inflection point for the vote right now. Another really interesting metric, however, in this Rasmussen poll is the black vote. This is something that I think could be a real shock point for the pundit class, is the black vote here, because the recent numbers continue a trend that has been going on since really 2017, and that is that the Rasmussen Reader data point. They do a daily tracking poll. Rasmussen is the last polling agency in the country to do daily tracking polls, and what they found among likely black voters is that on October 26th, 27% of black voters approved of President Trump. On the 27th, the next day, it was 30%, 28th, 30%, 29th, the last day that they did it here, it was 31%. Almost 1 out of 3 black voters approve of the job that the president has been doing. Now, what's interesting about this is that the president only got 8% of the black vote in 2016. Hillary Clinton got 91%, and I guess a percentage point went somewhere else. So if Trump only gets partially up, there's no doubt that he has gained a lot of support, or at least approval, in the black community since he was elected president. Back in August, a Hill Harris X poll had 24% approval rating for the president. And you have people, it doesn't hurt that you have people like Lil Wayne and Ice Cube and other black celebrities coming out in favor of him, but I don't really think that they tip it a lot. I think that most black Americans that are favoring Donald Trump right now are actually seeing the benefits of his policies. There's a lot of noise in the background. I don't really think they believe he's racist, but I think probably some maybe think, yeah, he might be, but his policies are working for me. The whole racist thing, I think, is a non-starter, really, when you look at the actual data from Charlottesville and elsewhere and the actual press conference. At any rate, with the black voters here, what you're seeing is an incredible increase in their support. Now, how much of that will turn into actual votes for Donald Trump, we'll have to wait and see. But I think you can put money that it's going to be a lot more than 8 percentage points, or 8% that he had in 2016. If it doubled from there to 16%, that might be a wipeout. So when you have approval ratings closing in on, well, they're at 30% and 31%, getting to 16% doesn't really sound impossible. But we'll have to wait and see. But that's a huge potential shock point for the pundit class. Another one is the Hispanic vote. Now, I want to look at specifically a Telemundo Mason-Dixon poll that was just released 2 days ago, and it's in Florida. Now, Florida's a little bit of a different state. because it has this big Cuban population. So when you're looking at the Hispanic vote, but I'm going to break that down so you can see the differences and still see what's happening here. Because I think it really matters. Of course it matters in Florida because Florida is the biggest swing state and it has to go for Trump. But Cuban voters in Florida, well, first of all, let's take the overall vote in Florida. The Latino vote in Florida is 48% support Biden, 43% support Trump, and about 7% are undecided. So that is that's very close. I think it's closer than that, actually. I think that there's a chance that Trump could actually win the Hispanic vote in Florida. Be very close, but at least it could be a 50-50 split. Cuban voters, this is interesting. Of course, they overwhelmingly support Trump. They're known to be conservative. They're very anti-socialist, anti-communist. And according to this poll, Trump has a 50 percentage point advantage over Biden among Cuban voters. Now, Cuban voters are the largest Hispanic group in Florida with 29% of the Hispanic vote. So that really sort of matters. 71% to 23%, they favor the president right now. You think, well, sure, they always do, right? But what's really interesting about that is that in 2016, 54% of Cubans in Florida voted for Donald Trump. So they've gone from 54% support up to 71% support. If this Telemundo poll is right, Telemundo is not going to bake this poll in favor of Donald Trump. It's pretty clear that Telemundo hates Donald Trump. So, as far as polling goes, these are not biased numbers anyway. Whether they're accurate or not, that's a different story. Because I think all of these sort of come down to the general problem that all pollsters have, and I think it's even more true, maybe, for Black and Hispanic voters than it is for white voters, and that is the sort of silent Trump supporters. Those people who back in 2016, I always guess 2 to 4 percentage points in the poll, told pollsters that they were voting for Hillary Clinton, but they were voting for Donald Trump. They didn't change their mind. They were all along voting for Donald Trump. They just didn't feel like they had the social cachet, the social comfort level to tell a stranger that on the phone, which is how these surveys are conducted. Well, based on what we've seen over the past 4 years, and certainly the past year here, I suspect that that is all the more the case. When you see that the percentage of Republicans who are uncomfortable talking about their views anywhere in public or at the workplace or anywhere is 2 to 1 over Democrats, I think that you're going to have even more of this being the case. So is that true in the Black and Hispanic communities? Well, considering that the Black community has traditionally gone 90-10 ballpark for the Democrat, and when you see Candace Owens and other Black conservatives out there, and you see the vitriolic hatred that they get for coming out in favor of Trump, I would say that that's probably really, really true now. So the silent majority among Black American voters might be even higher than that. Same to a lesser degree with Hispanic voters because they are generally 2 to 1 in favor of the Republican. And I think that they had that same sort of thing because he thought that the border wall was terrible. Look, a lot of Hispanic Americans actually don't mind the border wall because they want people to come here legally because, well, they're Americans like the rest of us, right? And they want to have controlled immigration and all. So I think when you take these together, what you're going to see is a couple of real big shock points for the pundit class. I will say, before I wrap up here, I will say that there is other side to it. I think there really is a bit of a problem with suburban women voters. That problem for Trump was bigger than it was since the riots. So before the riots and the destruction and the BLM threats to take it to the suburbs and all, I think that was a bigger problem. I think some of those people who might be considered safety moms are looking at what happened there and the silence of the Democrats for so long and the law and order message of the president. And in the end, he might not have as big a problem with them as you think. So you take this all together, and I think you have a potential shock coming up. Now, nobody knows for sure. I don't know for sure. I'm just looking at this stuff, and based on this data and who did it and what we can sort of derive from it, I think there's a very good chance that not only does Trump win, but he really overperforms in groups that he is not expected to at all, and it's possible that once again, the pundit class is going to have a lot of egg on their face, and I wouldn't mind that so much.